Let's say that if we can, fix the money, fix the world, so to speak. So this money, maybe it's not the root of the cause, but it certainly accelerates and feeds into this kind of short time perspective. So if we could fix that, where these interventionists don't have the ability to just create all this money from thin air, we went to a sound money, a fixed money supply like Bitcoin, and then that slows down our perspective on money, then you believe that then that probably helps start changing the perspective on all other areas of our life?
I think so. So, like, if you think about all the ancient teachings, and if not just ancient, like even the Austrian teachings, like all this sort of stuff, they try and educate human beings to be more mature, more moral, more honorable. And a lot of these things sort of revolve around behaving like an adult, thinking about the future, not just about the present, right? Like they sort of, all of these great stories, these great philosophies, whether it's Stoicism or Christianity or any of these things, they all kind of try and impart these lessons on human beings. But as we sort of identified, as like, human beings have a tendency to want to do things the easy way and, get the shortcut, and if they don't feel the consequence of the shortcut, then they're oblivious to, whether what they did was, right or wrong or indifferent. Now, by fixing the money, what you end up doing is you create a new environment in which, at least the hypothesis here is that if you make a poor economic choice, the consequence is far more localized, and therefore you get feedback, right? And we talked about this in the Young Communist Manifesto when we wrote that. Is like the faster the feedback loop, or the closer the consequence, to the actor, the more likely they are to adapt and change in order to survive. And my hypothesis in my article in the Bitcoin Times was that Bitcoin kind of makes what the Austrians and prudent schools of thought all throughout history have sort of suggested. I think Bitcoin kind of codifies it in the economy by making the money fixed and not allowing any bailouts through printing more money or all that sort of stuff. And I actually think that what will happen is smart people, good operators, will actually orient themselves in such a way that the teachings of Austrian economics and all that sort of stuff don't just have to call upon people's like honor and intelligence and maturity to behave the right way. There's actually going to be an economic benefit to behaving the right way, because you're less likely to blow yourself up, because your purchasing power is increasing just purely by function of being a responsible adult and saving, so it kind of changes that game a little bit. So I'm hopeful in that sense. That
that's an interesting point. I've referenced many times Lenin's quote where he said that destroy capitalism, debauch the currency, through inflation you steal, and then the best way to get rich is through gambling and theft, right? And so that's kind of where we're at, this gambling and theft. And so then you just start looking at your whole life that way, and you're just trying to thieve and steal and gamble and trick everything, kind of a thing. But in regards to that last piece, you were talking about our savings. And so like if we did have this kind of like fixed money supply and our savings were sound, that really starts to change a lot of things, right? Because one, we have to continually work harder to try to offset the theft of inflation. And now that extra time we might save could go into building better relationships or better education or knowledge and becoming more mature, because you're saying like the argument or maybe the problem is that we're not maturing enough. And as you were saying that, I was thinking back to the chicken or the egg dilemma. You don't have kids, I do. And kids at 1 and 2 years old have very short time preference. It wasn't the money, it wasn't fiat money that taught them that. They're born with that, right? And it's through the act of maturing that you learn to delay the gratification.
Totally.
So to me, and as I started kind of thinking about that, you used the word maturity, and it kind of brought that into perspective. But, I was on this Twitter Spaces recently, and we started getting kind of into, what does the future of money look like on Bitcoin? And they're trying to explain how, I think there could be some fractional reserve, and there'd be, people would loan you money against your Bitcoin, and you can get some yield this way, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, if your money held value and actually bought you more goods and services in the future than less, I wouldn't need to be investing it and I wouldn't need to be earning yield. And so like you're trying to like think of how it could be used in context of what we have today. But if my money bought me more goods and services, then I just save my money and I just keep focusing on wealth creation instead of this whole investing complex, Wall Street industrial complex that's been built up kind of a thing.
I agree. One of the best articles that was ever written about this concept is called The Great Definancialization, which was written by Parker Lewis in 2020. He actually wrote it for edition 3 of the Bitcoin Times. It was one of my favorite ever. And it was actually around the first time you and I did a podcast, actually. I remember I was in Germany when he wrote the article, and I was in Germany when we did our first podcast together. But he basically, it's called The Great Definancialization, and the premise of the article is that while people think that Bitcoin's going to increase financialization of the world and everything, is like no, it's actually going to simplify all of this excess baggage and confusion that comes with the financial world today, because we are trying to find ways basically not to become poor. Like that's literally all these machinations, like investing and trading and like millions and millions upon millions derivatives products and all this sort of stuff. It's all hot air, it's all fluff, and it's all kind of like a roundabout way to try and offset the damage that basically monetary inflation does to the world. And it's like, let's just, Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot, right? They said you will become whatever it was, like king of this region, if you can untie the knot before the sun goes down. And he looks at the knot, looks at the sun, pulls out his sword, and he just cut the knot in half, right? So let's just, Bitcoin is cutting the Gordian knot of this tangle of crap. You've got people talking about like, oh, let's open up regulations a little bit. It's like, no, let's just cut the crap and, let the chips fall, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something I talk to my kids a lot about, specifically my oldest daughter, and she's kind of wrestling with this, like, what's she going to do, and does she want to take class at university? I'm like, what is it that you ultimately want? And I'm like, what's just the quickest way to get there? Like, do you need to go through this existing system to get to where you want to go? In my opinion, from where I'm at, the answer is no. And kind of to your point, like, do you need to sit there and untie the knot, or do you just cut it? A conversation I've had many times with some of the people I'll leave unnamed for now, but they talk about like, well, how does it fix the euro dollar market? Right, that's a question I've been asked a bunch of times, right? Because like we have this huge problem with all these offshore dollars, and that's really where the shortage is happening. The Fed doesn't have enough firepower to actually keep enough dollars in supply because of what's happened in the euro dollar market, and then now the yield curves are inverting. And how does it fix that? And I'm like, it doesn't. Like it just does away with the whole need for that in the first place. Like so. It's kind of like cutting the knot, so to speak. We got about 30 or 45 seconds left. Anything else you want to throw out before we wrap this up?
No, other than like if people found this interesting and they want to dig into this a little bit further, like bitcointimes.io is where they can pick up a copy of the Bitcoin Times. So there's 5 editions. The latest being the Austrian one, I think is really, 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 really special. So people want to support and check that out, by all means. But I hope they enjoyed this history and economics lesson.
Yeah, hopefully, and I would really encourage everyone to just dig into this a little bit. Get the Bitcoin Times. I have every issue that's come out. Check out Mises.org as well. Lots of good articles on Mises as well. Check out the book that we wrote, the Uncommunist Manifesto. You can get that on Amazon. Just search Uncommunist Manifesto. And check that out as well. And man, keep digging into this. It can change not just your life, but change the world. You've been listening to the Mark Ma Show. We're talking about the decentralized revolution in studio with Aleks Svetski, and that's what we got. Thanks for listening.